here. So I want to talk about three different things. I want to talk today a bit about generative AI, IoT security and focus, and the escalation of cyber threats. So, in terms of generative AI, we've seen a lot of buzz in the media, in the press, with things like Chat GPT and Stable Diffusion and DALI. So, this area of being able to have someone interact with the AI system and help generate something that's new is super a super hot trend. In terms of text, one of the things that Craig had mentioned in his session that he was concerned about is people being able to use things like Chat GPT to create malware or to create code that may create vulnerabilities into systems, which is definitely an issue and concern that a lot of people need to be able to think about and learn more about. So I think as people get their hands on these systems, as people find new and novel ways to think about and use these systems, I think this is going to be an issue that people need to really look very closely at. So I'm excited about the innovation that comes from things like that. What the other side of this, which is something I talk about in terms of privacy, data privacy, is the image side of this. So let's say having a AI system, let's say you do a text prompt, you tell it to create a picture, and maybe the picture that it creates you want to use in some uh, let's say you want to use a marketing campaign or something like that. There is a chance, based on the way that this data is sourced, that image may have been something that was grabbed from somewhere where that wasn't consented. There was a recent case where a woman had submitted her photograph to a medical study, and somehow her image that was only given, she had to sign like a release with the medical provider to have this image. Somehow this image ended up into to this AI system that generated other images based on her image. So that's kind of a big problem that we're going to have with these image generators, because even though these applications are generating a new image, they have to have a image of some sort to actually create a new image, right? So it's not necessarily a brand new image. It's kind of a new rendition or a new version of an image that maybe they have. And then also, if these AI systems are creating images that look like a real person that exists, that may be a problem, right? So let's say you're going to work and you look at a billboard and it has picture, let's say maybe it's a medical ad for some type of chronic disease, and the photograph looks like you, right? So, the legal implications are just out of this world. I think it's something that can be very problematic if people feel as though these systems are taking images or taking data that maybe it shouldn't have. So part of it is excitement about doing things with images, or being able to create something. Let's say create an image without having a designer, or create content maybe on a web page or something without having a marketing person. Or for people who do design or people who do marketing, maybe these tools can really help cut down their time. But those are the types of things that I'm thinking about in terms of what the larger implications of things like generative AI will be in the future. So, again, I'm excited about the innovation, always concerned about what the harm could be. So I think we're going to really be able to look at this more closely to see how that plays out. The IoT security focus. My session, I wanted to call it managing risks of the Internet of Everything. So the IoT security focus is something I'm really concerned about. As we said, and as trends have said, IoT creation and device uses are through the roof. I think I've been watching these trends for over, I don't know, 5 or 6 years at least. And when I look back at the statistics for the growth of IoT, the place where we are now, IoT, is way beyond what people anticipated. So the growth has been exponential. It creates exponential risk for organizations because these devices often do, people who create these devices want them to be used by as wide a spectrum of people as possible. So a lot of times things that the devices can do are turned on by default. And so when someone like a business implements a device or individual implements a device, there may be settings and there may be things that individual can do to maybe change the way that device operates in a way that creates more security and more privacy for them. So a lot of times people, for example, let's say this thing is on your network, maybe has a default password, you don't change the default password, but everyone else, maybe a cyber criminal who clicks into your network, that may be like the most vulnerable place for them to be able to access your network. So let's say, let's say you have malware detection, antivirus, you think you have the best firewalls for things like your computers um, and your phones, but maybe you hadn't thought about the smart thermostat, maybe you hadn't thought about the smart speaker. All of these things that have internet connectivity create like a more risk for individuals and for companies that are using this, and it definitely creates a legal risk for companies, especially if these devices are doing things that they are not aware of, like maybe it's collecting data in a way that they didn't think it was. There was a recent case that I come up about, I think it was 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven had put this tablet in their stores, and it's supposed to have people do a survey and they get a coupon or something. What the company didn't say is that when people interacted with this device, it was not only taking their answers from the survey, it was also doing facial recognition and face printing, and they were storing that stuff in a database, and they were trying to like match people up together and stuff. And so this was in Australia, that was against the law. We're seeing a lot of laws starting to try to really put a finer point or try to create legal obligations for companies to either be more transparent about that type of data collection or not do it. So in this particular case in Australia, the company had to delete the images. They had to delete the algorithm that created these images, and they had to make this. Because the application that they were trying to put out there was a survey app. That's really all it should be doing. So it shouldn't be doing facial recognition and all this stuff. So a lot of it is around the visibility and the transparency about what these devices are doing. And I feel like in an IoT sense, you just don't know that, right? So I say an IoT device is like a computer without a screen. So it's like, what is the device doing? What is it capable of doing? These things are being updated over the air. So let's say the firmware can be updated. The software that is running can be updated. So maybe the device that you bought a year ago, now it has more features. Maybe it has more functionality that you're not quite aware of. So with those new features and functionality come new risks that you have. Also, I want to talk about escalating cyber threats. As our digital world becomes more complex, we are having more cyber threats, and that's only going to continue to increase. So I think there are a number of problems, but probably one of the biggest problems I see with cyber threats is that the traditional way that organizations used to try to protect their assets and stuff, it was based on like a castle analogy. So they thought, okay, all the data, all the information, all the valuables are in the castle. So if we have people at the gates and we have big walls, then nothing can happen, right, with this data. But now, because of things like work from home, these connected devices, people are doing computing outside of the castle, right? So, instead of thinking about let's have someone at the gate, the technology, the data, the information, the knowledge is not in the castle anymore. So now we have to have a new paradigm shift in terms of how we think about data protection, and a lot of that, in my view, has to go to a data level and also a device level. So it can't just be let's create this big wall, put everything behind it, and then everything is good. That's just not the way it works. So it has to change from this castle analogy to more, I don't know, maybe it's like a planetary analogy. I'm not sure, where there are devices all over. And they need their own level of protection at a device level, but then also we need to minimize the amount of data that these things can either collect or retain, because that is where the real threat and problem happens. So if let's say someone breaches your device and there's nothing on the device that's either personally identifiable and will not cause a breach, then that is what you really want. You want to be able to minimize the risk, even if someone were to break into a device, that they could actually give any actionable intelligence. So in my view, being able to secure devices in that way will make it not worth it for cyber criminals to be able to breach those devices, because they're like, if they break in, there's nothing of value there. Why do it? Right. So that's really what I think, where we're going with this. And I want to make sure that we stay on time with this. Anyone have any questions? Well, we're at the top of the hour. Let's see. Attendees we notified. Okay. I'm opening up the Q&A just in case someone has any questions. Let's wait a second. I don't see any on the Q&A. Okay. Stephen, thank you. Do you think devices for end customer users will be more clear about the data they collect and how they do it in the near future? I think they will have to be. A lot of the laws and regulations that are being developed right now are really around transparency. And then also, I think the White House right now is working on a labeling scheme for IoT devices. I think that's great. I think it needs to be put in a way where it can be updated, so that people know when these devices change and there maybe there are new risks or new features that they need to really be thinking about.